Mhm.
You running this time?
He said he was gonna be on, but I know he was also in a hearing, I believe, too. So
Are you in a hearing? Are you running this?
I'm already.
Oh.
Sadly,
Okay.
and, you know,
Sound?
your pointer and your work. I can't figure out where I'm pointing it.
Good morning, everyone. Folks are joining up from other committees right now. I'll start in just a moment. Good to see you, David.
Hey, Representative. Good to see you too.
And nice to kind of meet you, Mr. Hammond. How are you?
How you doing? Great seeing you too.
Senator Cohen, given my technological issues here, if you wouldn't mind sort of taking lead on this, that would be preferable.
Sure. Looks like we are live and recording, so we can get started, and folks will be filtering in and out, I'm sure. Lots of committee meetings going on today, as is usual this time of year in the Legislative Office Building, but so glad to have you here. Good afternoon, both Mr. Corus and Mr. Hammond. Glad to have you with us. And I know the committee is very much looking forward to just getting a debriefing on the Port Authority and the goings on as of late. And, you know, I don't know, Representative Lamar, my co-chair, do you have any opening remarks?
Just quickly, like we've done this for a few years now, where we provide a brief overview of the operations at the port for the last couple of years, and also give a window into what the challenges and opportunities are moving forward. It's been a pretty lively conversation for us in the past. I'm sure it will be again today, but I do greatly appreciate the work of Mr. Levine, Mr. Corus, and newly Mr. Hammond on behalf of the Port Authority, and their willingness to join us today and just give legislators on the Transportation Committee this brief overview.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Senator Wong, did you have any opening comments before we get going?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And no, I'm very eager to hear on the updates and progress on an issue that is critically important to our economics in the state, and also to clear the air in some of the potentially misleading information out there and get some clarity. So I really appreciate the opportunity for Mr. Corus to appear and before the committee and giving us an opportunity to learn more about what's going on in the Port Authority. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Representative Kennedy, any opening remarks?
Just quickly, nice to see you again, Mr. Corus, and welcome, Mr. Hammond, and I look forward to the presentations as being the newest member of this committee. So let's move it along. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the floor is all yours. Connecticut Port Authority. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Chair Senator Cohen, Co-Chair Representative Lamar, Vice Chair Senator Lopes, Vice Chair Representative Berger Gaval, Ranking Member Senator Wong, Ranking Member Representative Kennedy, members of the General Assembly's Transportation Committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today to provide a recap of the Connecticut Port Authority's activities in 2022 and our future plans for 2023 and beyond. My name is Ulysses Hammond, and I am the interim executive director of the Connecticut Port Authority. I have been on board now for 8 months. Believe me, it's been also, it feels almost like years, really, sometimes. I had been retired for 6 years from Connecticut College as its vice president for administration when a group of citizens asked whether I would consider this post. My golf buddies, who I enjoy playing with 4 to 5 times a week, are still ribbing me and scratching their heads. However, my wife, on the other hand, is suspiciously pleased that I am back at work and in the arena. Frankly, however, I am and have been totally convinced about the enormous jobs and economic development promise of the largest maritime infrastructure project in the state of Connecticut that is taking place in southeastern Connecticut in New London. As you know, the Connecticut Port Authority was established by the General Assembly as a quasi-public agency in 2014 to establish maritime commerce as an essential cornerstone of our state's economy by making necessary improvements to the infrastructure at our ports and small harbors. It is the mission of the Port Authority to grow Connecticut's economy and create jobs by strategically investing in the state's 3 deep water ports and 35 small harbors to enable each to maximize its own economic potential. In December 2022, the authority submitted its annual report to this committee, which included, number 1, a summary of the authority's activities, number 2, description of the projects undertaken by the authority in the preceding year, number 3, a list of the projects which, if undertaken by the state, would support the state's maritime policies and encourage maritime commerce and industry. Number 4, a description of the authority's finances, including operating and financial statements. Number 5, recommendations for improvements to existing maritime policies, programs, and facilities. And number 6, recommendations for legislation to promote the authority's purpose. I'd like to really just provide you with just an overview of just a few of the critical ongoing projects and initiatives that have been covered in the annual report. First, I'd like to discuss the Maritime Infrastructure Improvements Project taking place at the State Pier Terminal in New London. The Port Authority is overseeing a generational improvement to the transformation of the State Pier Terminal in New London into a state-of-the-art heavy lift capable port facility that will accommodate a wide variety of cargoes, including wind turbine generator staging and assembly. The infrastructure improvements have been designed to address previously identified facility shortcomings and enhance the State Pier and site conditions to accommodate future cargo needs that capitalize on opportunities for our state. As a result of public and private investment in the terminal, Connecticut is at the forefront of a new American offshore industry. The State Pier Terminal will be the first operational United States-based heavy lift marine terminal that will accommodate offshore wind towers, nacelles, and blades, as well as other maritime cargoes. In the spring of 2023, Terminal Operator Gateway will resume port operations and begin receiving offshore wind component deliveries. 3 offshore wind projects commissioned by Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island, a total of approximately 160 turbines with an output of 1,760 megawatts of power, enough power to power over 1 million homes, are scheduled now for assembly and delivery from New London. The first of these projects, South Fork Wind, is scheduled for this summer, just in a few months. Let me mention just a few of the infrastructure and project highlights. The infrastructure upgrades that we're conducting right now will remake State Pier into a modern heavy lift capable terminal and meet the facility requirements of the offshore wind industry while maintaining its freight rail link. So the rail link will continue to be a feature of the pier. The upgrades include the creation of 2 heavy lift pads, each capable of handling loads of 5,000 pounds per square foot. The rest of the facility's load bearing capacity has been enhanced to 3,000 pounds per square foot. The load capacity of the previous pier was only 1,000 pounds per square foot. 3 offshore wind projects, as I indicated, have already been scheduled for delivery and once the facility is completed. The first is South Fork Wind. That will generate 132 megawatts of power for New York. Then is Revolution Wind, which will generate 304 megawatts of power for the state of Connecticut and 400 megawatts of power for the state of Rhode Island. And finally, Sunrise Wind, which will generate 880 megawatts of power for the state of New York. Hundreds of jobs have been created during the construction phase of the project. And I might add here that anytime during that project, we have had anywhere between 160 and 180 workers at the pier. We are currently in the 4th quarter of construction, whereby the northeast bulkhead, or what we refer to as the delivery berth, will be substantially complete by the end of this month, on target for South Fork Wind, the first offshore wind project by the joint venture of Ørsted and Eversource. Ørsted and Eversource, who will enter into a 10-year lease agreement for turbine generator assembly and staging, resulting in approximately 100 FTE jobs, offshore wind jobs at the terminal. Speaking of jobs, just last week, the president of the International Longshoremen's Association, after a year of quote unquote healthy negotiations with Gateway, also endorsed the State Pier project and announced that Local 1411 in New London has been included in those negotiations and will be a central source of union labor at the site. Access to training of workers is also being finalized by the parties. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. Additionally, I contacted the fishermen who docked at the pier prior to construction and will be meeting with them this month to finalize dedicated fishermen access arrangements. They are excited about this, and so are we. As you can see, we are well underway in transitioning from construction to operations of the terminal. During periods when Ørsted and Eversource are not using State Pier, Gateway Terminal will market the facility to other commercial enterprises to ensure maximum utilization. However, the main event of the project will be the arrival in 2024 of the first United States-built wind turbine installation vessel, the Charybdis, which is being built by Dominion in Texas right now and expected to be sea-ready in late 2023. Its first deployment will be none other than out of the State Pier in New London, chartered by joint venture Ørsted and Eversource to support the installation of the Revolution Wind and Sunrise Wind projects. In May of 2022, you may recall, United States Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm met with the workers on site and toured the State Pier Terminal and emphatically declared, quote, "We want to replicate this," end of quote. I also had a brief moment last month to meet and engage the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, while in New London. He too was aware and impressed with our project and its promise for Connecticut and the nation. Moreover, we continue to use every opportunity there is to educate and inform our community, from on-site tours to conference presentations to virtual meetings with community and corporate boards, including port representatives from other East Coast states that are currently looking to embark upon similar port improvement projects in their respective states. With the terminal upgrades on track to begin receiving deliveries this spring and assembled turbines leaving the terminal in the summer, Connecticut's investment toward this unique maritime asset has positioned the state as a first mover in maritime economic development. When it comes to deep water ports, in New London right now is, of course, is not the only state's deep water ports, along with Bridgeport and New Haven, of course. The authority is the state's lead agency for coordinating with the United States Army Corps of Engineers on all state funded dredging projects. Our work in Bridgeport and New Haven is primarily focused on managing harbor improvement dredging projects. For instance, in Bridgeport, the Bridgeport Harbor Channel is less than 30 feet in depth. United States Army Corps of Engineers is considering a maintenance dredge of 33 feet for Bridgeport Harbor and 14 feet for Black Rock Harbor. The Corps is currently in the process of creating a dredge material management plan as well for that particular harbor. In New Haven, we have the New Haven Harbor Navigation Improvement Project underway. The Deepening Facility Alternatives Study evaluated depths of -32 feet to -42 feet and found that the optimum improvement depth was determined to be a -40 feet. This equates to a total cubic yardage of 4.2 million cubic yards of rock, sand, and silt clay removal. The main channel and turning basin were last maintained in 2014-15, having dredged 900,000 cubic yards of sand and silt placed at the Central Long Island Sound disposal site. When it comes to also the establishment of the Connecticut Dredge Team, in 2022, thanks to efforts by Senator Kathy Austin and Congressman Joe Courtney, a technical work group was established to assist participants in exchanging information and to streamline interaction with federal agencies. Senator Austin keeps this effort on task by scheduling updates every 6 weeks. The work group is housed within the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and is co-chaired by Connecticut Deep and the Department of Transportation employee who is assigned right now to the Port Authority. In addition to the Connecticut Port Authority, the dredging team membership is comprised of representatives from the United States Department of Protection Agency, Region 1, the U.S. Corps of Engineers, North Atlantic Division, and the Connecticut Marine Trades Association, along with other stakeholders. When it comes to also the Small Harbor Improvement Projects Program that we refer to as the SHIP program. As I noted earlier, it is the mission of the Connecticut Port Authority to grow Connecticut's economy and create jobs by strategically investing in the state's 3 deep water ports and small harbors to enable all of them to maximize their own economic potential. However, in pursuit of this mission, the CPA has created the Small Harbor Improvement Program as a central part of its strategy to support economic development throughout Connecticut's waterfront communities. In Connecticut, any municipality may undertake a harbor improvement project, including the development, improvement, construction, and installation of berthing areas, channels to berthing areas, seawalls, piers, docks, navigation aids, and bridges pursuant to harbor improvement plans. In 2022, the authority approved the 3rd round of SHIP recipients. 11 applications were received and 10 met the qualification requirements of the program. 8 of the applications were from entities and municipalities that had received prior SHIP funding. Ultimately, 10 qualified projects were selected to receive a total of $5.9 million in grant funds to be distributed across 7 municipalities statewide, including Branford, Guilford, Stonington, Stratford, Norwich, Stamford, and Norwalk. When it comes to our administrative operations, none of the projects that I have mentioned before would have been possible without the dedicated staff of the authority, who continue to box and perform well above their weight every day. For the first time, we are functioning with a full staff, consisting of 3 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, plus a Department of Transportation employee assigned to the authority. The tremendous work of the 1.5 member finance department over the past year is evidenced by the recent release of our fiscal year 2022 independent audit, which was a clean audit that was presented by the auditors at the CPA's board meeting in December, making clear evidence that the Connecticut's Port Authority is currently operating and managing its finances at the highest professional level. As noted in the annual report, the authority executed a memorandum of understanding with the Office of Policy and Management in September of 2019, which has since been amended in several times since, as open issues were rectified. The current amended agreement extends the engagement through June 30 of 2023. Other notable highlights for 2022 include the appointment of an interim finance director who also serves as the ethics liaison, the advancement of critical financial management systems for managing operational finances and bond accounts, also the initiation and completion of the state's biennial audit, as well as the establishment and administration of the authority's first state pilot contested case administrative hearing as recommended by the Connecticut Pilot Commission and approved by the board. I'm going to also ask perhaps our chair to elaborate on the recommendation that has been made to the authority regarding the Pilot Commission's recommendation that was submitted last year. Chairman Kouros?
Great, thank you very much, Ulysses, for that thorough overview, and look forward to all the questions from the committee. I'll just very briefly introduce our single legislative ask this year. We've had it before the committee in previous years. I don't think that there's been any issues or opposition. It just has not advanced for lack of time. We hope with this long session that it may be able to advance. And it's really rather straightforward. The pilots have a training process in order to get their licensing and certification, and it involves working on the routes in which they will ultimately perform that duty. Because of a lower level of activity in Bridgeport, this amendment would allow their training to take place in other places and in other ways. And so it's really a flexibility to acknowledge the disparate levels of vessel activity in our different ports, to provide a broader group of pilots the training and certification that they need so that they can be available to the industry and to the maritime sector as a resource to bring boats into harbor. Happy to answer any further questions on that, but I think it's fairly non-controversial.
Madam Chair, I'm also available for questions as well.
Terrific. Well, I thank you both for that presentation. Mr. Hammond, especially yours, which was very thorough and much appreciated. I know there'll be questions from the committee. I see a hand up already, but I'm just going to ask what you see as the Port Authority's biggest challenge right now. There's obviously a lot of activity, especially anticipated in New London with the installation of the wind turbine. But just wondering, what you see as the biggest challenge. Is it, dredging issues for those small harbors and, coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers? Is it clearly you're fully staffed now, which had been a challenge in the past? Just wondered if you could, give the committee your thoughts on what your biggest challenge is coming into this year.
Maintaining staffing and hopefully growing staff is going to be, I think, one of the challenges going forward. As you asked the question about going forward, that for me is perhaps one of the top priorities I think and we face at the CPA. We are operating right now, as I indicated, with only 3 full-time staff, 1 part-time staff, and only 1 person too that has been loaned to us by the Department of Transportation. As it relates to the pier and the project in New London, it's now going from construction to operations, and we are.
Uh-oh. I think Mr. Hammond froze.
I'll jump in while he's frozen there. I think, Senator, you hit the nail on the head just in terms of dredging and activities like that. Maritime projects exist at this very challenging junction between a variety of different regulatory regimes. And so, we have, I think, typically been the sort of leading edge of the state's efforts to coordinate between municipalities, between state agencies, particularly deep, between the Army Corps, Coast Guard, NOAA, et cetera. And I think as our activity increases, as we start to embark on dredging in at least one of the other deep water ports in New Haven, as we try and do the smaller ship projects and work with our municipalities to support them, continuing to manage that overlapping group of folks at all various levels, and frankly, be accessible so that, the municipalities know that we are a resource for them, that the Army Corps knows that we're a primary point of contact, and just playing that role to avoid future confusion or stepping on toes or delay that could easily result.
I appreciate that. As a shoreline legislator, I've encountered a number of these issues in dealing with just the regulatory burden associated with this, the timelines associated with this, and coordinating with the Army Corps. So I appreciate that, and I certainly appreciate what a challenge that can be for the Connecticut Port Authority as well. Mr. Co-Chair, did you want to ask any questions now, or should I move to committee members? My co-chair is having some technical difficulties today. Oh,
Yeah,
there he is.
for some reason, my computer is not cooperating all that well. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, for the overview that you've provided. I always find it really quite interesting and engaging. It's the area of this committee's work that I have the least background knowledge in, and so I rely on you two specifically to help me guide through some of the challenging issues you guys confront. Fascinating and always thrilled when you talk about the small harbor improvement plans and programs, and I'm going to continue to encourage you to help us realize the original vision that we had for the Port Authority, which is moving more cargo into and out of our large harbors, and potentially moving cars off of our roads as well by developing transportation options in along the harbor. I know those are expensive, long-term projects that you guys are both focused on and interested in, but I think we're going to maybe try to push you. Once we can get the scope of Millenton Pier behind us and operational on site, like some of those big picture issues that are transportation in nature, I'm hoping to rely on your guidance as we move forward. So again, thank you again today. And because of my technological issues, I'm going to turn it right back over to Senator Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Representative Carney, followed by Representative Conley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Ulysses and David, it's nice to see you. My line of questioning is going to be specific to the New London Pier. So I guess my first question is a general one, and we were told that no one was going to come back to ask for additional funding for this project. Why has that changed?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that since I'm the one that said that. Based on the information that we had available to us when we were before Bond Commission in July of 22, we had a fully contracted project. We had a timeline that showed completion this spring. And it wasn't until late summer, early fall, as we embarked on some additional aspects of the project, most particularly the State Pier heavy lift pad and what we call the tow wall, which is an underwater retaining wall, that we started to encounter some unforeseen issues. And I'll summarize those as such. They really fall into a few categories. One is deep obstructions, basically boulders that are 50, 60, 70 feet underground. We had done some probing, we had certainly done some analysis, but you're not going to find out everything, and we've encountered some of that in places where we didn't expect it. We also encountered an outcropping of bedrock that we had not expected. Again, probing was done. We had a profile of where the bedrock would be, and our pile driving was designed in response to that. There was an outcropping of bedrock, which requires some different methodology that has cost associated with it. And then the third category that I would mention is just some soil conditions that are not performing the way we had anticipated. And so with the load bearing capacity that we're designing this facility for, it relies on various points of tension and retaining walls, et cetera. And after installed, one of those aspects, which we tested, was not performing to its parameters. And so those are going to result in additional costs. The reason we don't, I'll jump ahead just maybe with one answer preemptively to say, what is that number and do we have it today? We don't, and we will share it with you all and with the public as soon as we do. And the reason we don't is because some of the design that's meant to overcome those challenges is still being finalized. And so once that design is finalized, once we then negotiate that scope of work with our contractors, and then once we negotiate with our partners as to the distribution of how we're going to overcome that budget gap, then we will come to you all this spring with the outstanding dollar amount. Believe me, I wish it was not the case. I absolutely, we did not expect or want to be in this situation, but the good news, as Ulysses said, is the first phase of the facility will be delivered this spring. And while we are completing what I'll call the second phase, the relieving platform at State Pier, there will be activity already taking place and revenue starting to come in from the remainder.
What sorts of activity will be taking place at that time?
In terms of the wind operations?
Any activity?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we expect, as Ulysses said, the first wind farm that will be installed out of the facility is South Fork, which is relatively small compared to Revolution and Sunrise, which will come later. But it's a dozen turbines, and we expect, maybe I'll take a step back. Portions of the facility will be transferred over to Gateway in March for them to begin to secure it and to operate it as our concessionaire. In April, Siemens Gamesa, the turbine manufacturer, in partnership with Ørsted and Eversource, will start to set up the site for turbine installation operations. And then in May, we expect the first vessel will deliver turbines, blades, and
Nacelles.
nacelles, blades, and
Nacelles.
supporters.
Mhm.
And what happens at the site is rather interesting. Not a whole lot with the blades, right? The blades just kind of sit there ready to go back out to the farm. But the towers come in 4 or 5 sections, depending on the scale of the turbine. They get wired, they get additional things welded onto them, harnesses, stairwells, they get put together. That is the work that takes place at State Pier. And you will see that visibly this spring for the first farm.
Has anyone been hired yet to do any of that work?
Yes, so it's a variety of things. As Ulysses said, the International Longshoremen Association has been negotiating with Gateway to provide the labor, which includes, taking stuff on and off the ships, moving some things around the facility. And then there are other workers that are hired directly by Siemens to be doing those other activities. And they do have active RFPs out and underway to secure their suppliers and their labor.
Okay, I don't recall what the initial, or even if there was one, target for jobs was at the pier, but do you feel confident that you will achieve that number if it exists? And I guess a second part to that, do you feel that because some jobs were lost as a result of this, do you feel that these jobs will make up for that? And do you feel, I don't want to throw too much at you, but do you feel that this has been a good return on investment, or will be?
Sure. I'll answer as briefly as I can, and certainly feel free to ask follow-ups if you want more detail on anything. I mean, I can say definitively that the amount of employment and activity at the pier will surpass multiple fold the level that was there previously. In terms of the targets, there were job year targets that were announced several years ago in the several hundred. We are now talking about that in terms of full-time equivalent, and it is over 100. It is consistent with the numbers that we've said previously, but that's kind of the order of magnitude in terms of over 100 jobs there consistently. And then in terms of a good investment, I absolutely believe so, right? When we go back several decades, we have plans from the Department of Transportation and their consultants that called for the upgrading of this facility because it was not in line with the needs of the 21st century. Those plans always said, wait to do this investment until you have a private capital contribution and a guaranteed user. The RFP process in 2018 and the Harbor Development Group in 2019 secured that. And so we have $77.5 million invested thus far by the private sector. And if we look at port investment elsewhere on the East Coast and in the region, it's typically and even currently with wind being done exclusively with public investment. And then we have the utilization of that, and we have a minimum rent of $2 million a year. We will get a share, the public sector will get a share of the operating revenue from Gateway. And then there is sublease potential. And, we could be generating significant revenue from this facility, not to mention that we're only really talking about the next 10 years. We will own this facility forever. And just as we reaped over 100 years of benefit out of the prior iteration, I suspect we'll reap benefits for decades, if not a century, out of this facility into the future.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I guess going forward, are there significant cost control measures being implemented by the Port Authority or, at the pier to ensure that costs do not go up again, and you are not coming back again to ask for additional dollars from the people of Connecticut?
Yeah, so I'll speak a bit about the controls that are in place, because I mean, first of all, I don't want anyone to go away from the situation thinking that, it's me out there on the pier kind of running this project, negotiating with folks. We have a robust team. In addition to Ulysses and his staff at the authority, we have a construction administrator, we have an engineer of record. There are a lot of people that are looking at this, and every number is scrutinized. Every number that we've agreed to thus far has been the result of negotiation. And I can say in every instance, we have negotiated that number down, and we continue to do so. In terms of, what happens in the future, I've learned my lesson from last summer that I'm not going to make any, definitive statements. But what I can commit to, as we have, is you'll all be in the loop. We discuss the project in public session at every meeting. These obstructions that were encountered late summer and early fall, we started talking about in those meetings and started indicating that there, could be a financial implication, and we'll continue to do that going forward. But we are, as Ulysses said, nearing the end of the project implementation, and so we're running out of things that could surprise us. But unlike a typical construction project, and you've all probably heard this, when you're building a building, everyone is most stressed while you're dealing with the subsurface conditions, when you're building the foundation. Once you're out of the ground, you have a little bit more certainty and a little bit more control. 100% of this project is in the ground and in that world where the greatest uncertainty exists. But we'll keep you all informed, and we're nearing completion.
Okay, I appreciate that. I could probably ask more questions, but I see my good colleague from Groton has her hand up, and I'm sure she has some good questions to ask you too. But I do thank you. As you both know, this project is under a magnifying glass, and I hope things go better in the future. But we will be paying attention, and the more information you can get us is certainly the better. So thank you very much.
You can count on that, Representative.
Thanks, Ulysses.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Senator and Representative Carney. I would love to put my camera on. However, for folks who aren't aware of what happens on the good port of New London and the Thames River, the military vehicles or the submarines and boats are moving around. And when those large vessels move around very close to us, unfortunately, we have unstable internet. So hopefully I'll be able to get through. And we're pleased in the port and the Thames River to have these vehicles. It's just a minor issue with internet and Wi-Fi when these large vessels move back and forth. So I would like to start with some of my concerns of the port. And I respect Ulysses, and I understand his internet did go out earlier, probably for the same reason I'm having. But locally, there's been issues with public trust with the Port Authority. So for the record, I'd like to be clear that at least, and that's why the local delegation has put in forth 2 bills for public-private in GAE, that success fees by this representative are not found to be acceptable. And I do not want to see in any future contracts any success fees from the Port Authority. Also, for the chairman, any contracts, because you are under such a microscope because of prior issues with the port, any contracts where a general is approving or bidding, even with approval and review of others, I want you to be well aware that because of the public trust and the fact that this is at this time 100% public money running the Port Authority, that any contract where a general contractor is reviewing their own bids should be reviewed, and in this legislator's opinion, are not appropriate and should not be approved by the Port Authority. Is that well understood, Mr. Chairman?
Of course, Representative, and let me be very clear just about a couple things. The Port Authority has not entered into any contract with a success fee since 2018, and we completely understand the legislature's position on this, and when the bill is passed, we will obviously respect it. In terms of the general contracting self-performing, I just want to be clear that The entire procurement process was managed through our MOU with DAS. We're confident that it was done within the regulatory environment that we operate, but we understand your concerns and we will absolutely heed those going forward. Just one last point in terms of our revenue, our operating revenue, though we don't have rent yet coming in from the pier, it is not wholly public because our private partners did pay us a revenue payment during construction, which covers approximately 2/3 of our operating expenses.
Mhm. And as we're continuing to build, I want to be clear that I understand that sometimes there are cost overruns. However, I'm looking for construction to be completed within the amounts appropriated. And if there are further requests made, I think it's really important for transparency that the issues that you have in the construction not only get spoken in your meetings, but just like there were many emails sent to this committee or to others in the delegation for this meeting, that those reasons are told to this committee and the delegation as soon as known.
Understood.
Yes.
We do always discuss at the meeting, and we will endeavor to provide better updates to you all.
So publicly, it seems to be a surprise, especially due to your statements at the last bonding commission, that this was all the money that was needed. It seems to be a surprise and an unpleasant surprise. And it's not appreciated, at least by this representative, that you're looking for additional funds to complete the project, because we were under the impression that you were going to complete the project based on what you stated at the prior bond meeting.
Understood.
So the longshoremen have been reaching out quite a bit. And as we know, due to the construction and due to boats not being able to be at State Pier, they have not been able to work at State Pier. Is there a time frame that you're aware of between the longshoremen and Gateway to get those that employment agreement or that contract solidified?
That is something that is underway right now, Representative, between Gateway and the Longshoremen's Association, as well as Local 1411. What has happened recently is very significant in terms of the negotiations between Gateway and the Longshoremen, the association actually coming to a point now wherein they're in a position and have now met with 1411, which is our local, which has been very, very important. And those discussions took place, I believe, last week, either last week or a week and a half ago. Those discussions took place to just update 1411 on exactly what had transpired in terms of those negotiations. But it was also to let 1411 know too that training is going to be also at the forefront of what is going to take place over the course of the next few weeks. And so the parties are now assembling and putting together training that will provide the kind of preparation that a lot of our workers are now going to need in order to be up to speed whenever the operation gets underway.
Mm-hmm. And because those are our local workers, it would be important from this legislator that we try to get those folks to work as soon as possible, because they could not work during construction. And are we looking at March 2023 dates? Is that correct for them, for hopefully work to start at the pier where folks can get employment who are longshoremen?
So
that is something, again, we're going to have to get more information really from Gateway and the Longshoremen's Association. Those negotiations, we have not been part of those negotiations. We're only now getting updates from them. So I will pass along that information to you as soon as we get that information, because that's the kind of thing we're interested in. And I also met personally with 1411 myself prior to the meeting of the Longshoremen and Gateway. So I'm very well aware of the fact that our workers, our local workers, have not been at the pier, and that also this is a new industry. And so there's going to be also additional training that they are going to need in order to be ready for the operation going forward.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you on getting those local folks back to work as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
I
That's,
want to
we're aligned there.
I want to stress that any news from the Port Authority, transparency due to issues we've had in the past. Again, anything with money, anything with contracts is really important that we know about any problems that you're having. And that goes not only to you, Ulysses, but to other members of the board. If there's an issue, I would rather hear about it from the board, from you, than reading it in the local paper. And I think that the public distrust, the issue is that a lot of the issues that we found are that we didn't hear about them from the board. We heard about them through the paper. And while the paper was great for uncovering those issues, it would have been better if we had known directly from the board that they were having an issue, they were having a problem, so we could work together legislatively on solutions, or we could have provided the tools that you needed earlier if we were made aware of a need from the Port Authority. I want to see this Port Authority be successful, and I want to see the main goal of growing our ports and hopefully getting some cargo traffic off the roads and through our ports, to get people access to cargo in a better way for the environment and utilize our ports in a better way. So I'd like to look forward to working with you, Ulysses. I know we've worked in the past on other projects, and to have a lot of transparency through the port. Thank you.
You can count on it.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Just a couple questions because I am newer to this committee. What was the original cost of this project, and are you on target for those costs?
So the short answer is no. There have been multiple changes in the estimates. The first estimate that was publicly discussed was actually, so the first number that people point to from the spring of 2019 was 93 million, which was the amount of state and private capital that was secured at that time. The full project cost estimate at that time was, with soft costs and contingencies, was actually closer to 110 or 120 million. Then as the design progressed, that was at sort of a 10% design phase stage. As design progressed, design changed, I should say, with a relocation of one of the two heavy lift pads, that increased to 157 million. But that was still based on design and estimates. We then went out to bid, and once we had the benefit of contractor pricing, we were at 23.5 million. Since the bids have been awarded, we have increased one time to 25.5. It was done in two steps, but it was one increase of 20 million. And we are now, as we said, negotiating the final, I'm not going to say final anymore. We are negotiating what we aim to be the final increase and a allocation of those costs between the parties. And so I actually think, as far as complicated in-water construction projects go, since bidding the work, we have actually stayed relatively close to that. We're within 10% right now, and then we'll have another future change. The big changes and the big evolution in the public discussion around cost was estimates related to different stages of design. And as I've said before, the Port Authority, we collectively and my predecessors should have been much better about articulating what those estimates were and where we were in the design process. But since we bid out the work, we have increased from 235 to 255. And that again includes all soft costs, some of which are atypical for a project because it includes lease of adjacent land that'll be mobilized for the wind effort, which is not a typical soft cost.
Is there still contingency funds left in the project?
No, we used our final, I mean, there are minor amounts of contingencies, several $100,000, but our last contingency amount, which was several million, we used late this fall.
Okay, thank you for that. And through you, Madam Chair, Mr. Hammond, in your report, you said the estimated completion, you're in the fourth quarter, is that correct?
Yes.
And when would production of the windmills start? Did you say summer of 23 this summer?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I'm sorry.
No problem. So in the fourth quarter of substantial completion and looking that production of the windmills would start in 2023. Did I hear that correct? Did I write that down? Okay.
Yes, this summer.
And
That's right.
you said that about hundreds of jobs would come through. Wait a minute, I have to. You said that many jobs have come from this project, but then later on, I thought you said you were having difficulty retaining workers.
Oh, no.
That for me, I think I read
That's,
that.
oh, no, that was when I was talking about two separate job situations. I talked about the fact that there are about 100, anywhere between 160 to 180 workers on the site currently, that is working on the site, working on the pier. But when I talked about the shortage of staff, I was talking about our operational staff, that is at the CPA. And the fact that we do not have adequate, as far as I'm concerned, we do not have adequate staffing at the CPA. That's the operational staff. We are only 3 full-time and 1 part-time, along with 1 full-time worker who has been on loan to us from the Department of Transportation. So that's the staffing level at the CPA.
And,
so I'm sorry I confused you there.
No, that's okay. And Mr. Heyman, earlier on you talked about a tour. I personally would love a tour of the.
Oh, I would love for all of you to come.
Other members would love the same thing as well. So
well, please, please. I will reach out to you and to anyone else, please, if you would like to have a tour. We do this for our community, and so for the entire state, and for those who are out of state as well.
We did a committee tour last spring.
Oh, okay.
With the changing composition and membership and leadership, as well as the progress that's happened on site, we should absolutely do that again this late winter or spring, whenever it makes sense.
I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be great if we could set that up. That would be super. I know some of you already have done it, but and then just for clarification for me, what are agencies? Are OPM or DAS, are they involved with this project as well?
So I can speak a bit to that. So in 2019, as part of the state's effort to add some capacity to our operations to help us kind of reposition ourselves for success, we entered into 2 MOUs. One was with DAS, which was specifically around the construction project at State Pier. And that MOU was in effect through procurement and contracting and setting up the construction project. It has since sunset. There was capacity challenges at DAS, and once they got us through that phase, they moved on. And then we also entered into one with OPM, which is ongoing. And as Ulysses said, we've actually extended it multiple times. The most recent of one brings us through the end of this fiscal year. And that has been on operations and our financial reporting. And we have seen tremendous success there. And I have to give kudos to the folks at OPM for the level of support that they've provided us. We now have, full accounting of all of our capital accounts, all of our core accounts, our operating P&L. As Ulysses said, our fiscal 22 audit was clean, which is maybe a little thing for some people who have been in that situation year after year, but for us, it is a huge deal and represents, I think, a very significant turning point. And OPM has been really instrumental in helping us get there.
Great, appreciate that. And then, Madam Chair, one final question for you. So whenever you're working with DEEP and U.S. Corps of Engineers and Connecticut Marine Trades, there's always going a lot of back and forth. Are all necessary permits, local, federal, all in place, state? Those are all in place, right?
For what?
To where you are in the project as now?
So for State Pier, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then for all the other projects, whether it's New Haven dredge or small harbors projects, it varies. And then as Ulysses mentioned, there's an ongoing effort around dredge material disposal, which is kind of a global discussion that is meant to streamline that process for projects going forward. And that discussion is underway.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I have a question from a colleague that couldn't be here today, if I may, Madam Chair. And that was, a question was, why was Best Teach terminated from the demolition contract earlier on? Can you address that?
Yeah, so I think I can address this to some degree, and I can clarify for everyone sort of what this question is about. The question is, Best Tech, the firm, had commenced some, I'm not sure if it was abatement and demolition or just abatement or just demolition, but work at one of the older warehouses on the facility, and they didn't ultimately complete that work. They were brought in to do that work by DAS. As I said, we had a relationship with them in the early stages of the construction project. And there came a point in time where we were asked to pay for that work through the project, which would have been an eligible expense, but we did not have any contract with Best Tech, so we did not have any mechanism to pay them. And so we made it clear that we could not pay for that work because they were not procured through our process related to the other state pier activities, as all of our other contracts were. And so they stopped working because they didn't have apparently a way to get paid. Hopefully that clarifies things.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me up to speed on this whole contract, this whole project, which I'm looking very much forward to for our residents of the state of Connecticut. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your questions, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Representative. Well, again, really appreciate having you here with us today, with your thorough presentation and your patience with our questions. And we will certainly be taking you up on the ability to take another tour. I think even for those who have been there before, I think we'll see some new progress, and that will be exciting. So we'll definitely have to set that up, and perhaps we can do that through Samuel, our clerk of the committee. Any closing remarks, Representative Lamar?
Just to say thank you again. This process that we go through every couple of years, where we bring you guys in and get a good overview of what the operations are on site, but also what you recognize as the opportunities for the peers, is one of my favorite meetings, just because of the time and energy you guys put into this thought process is something that most committee members don't have much experience with. And the tour you offered last year was really informative. It's one thing to see pictures and maps and global view of the pier, but once you get out there and have that experience and understand exactly what is happening, the number of opportunities inherent with the site itself, and a long-term vision that the Port Authority has adopted for the pier, I think gets people really excited, and we understand it in a more complete picture once you're, your feet are touching the gravel out there. It makes it a little bit easier. I would just recommend that maybe we cut off this talk of late winter, early spring, and instead maybe aim for the summer. That's my recommendation, having grown up in and around the London area. How about summertime? Once Abbott is open, that's a good time for us to go down there.
That makes absolute sense.
Come on down.
Sounds perfect to me. And again, by that time, I think work will be well underway, and some exciting improvements since the last visit of the committee. So we'll definitely appreciate that, and appreciate seeing the tourism actually that's going on at that point too. And this is just an exciting project for economic development for the state of Connecticut. So as well as progress with renewables, so which is near and dear to me as well. So any closing remarks, Representative Kennedy or Senator Wong, before we finish today?
Well said. Thank you again very much.
Well, thank you again so much. Appreciate it, and appreciate knowing that you're available not just today, but going forward for any questions that the committee members might have. So thank you very much for your time and effort.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Take care.